Good morning, Commissioners. We are ready to begin this morning, and we propose to call as our first witness Mr. Vishnu Prasad. He's here. Thank you. So is your microphone on? Right, there we go. Would you state your name?
Vishnu Prasad.
And what is your address?
1937, Block 8, Tushin, East Bank, Essequibo.
Now, Mr. Prasad, you have given a statement in relation to these proceedings,
Yes, I did.
in relation to this inquiry, I beg your pardon.
Yes.
And did you sign that statement?
Yes, I did.
And if you see it again, will you be able to identify it?
Yes, I will.
How will you be able to do so?
Because I recognize my signature.
Yes. Did you place any other markings on this document?
Yes, I did. I initialed all the pages.
Thank you. Commissioners, I'm respectfully asking that this statement be shown to the witness. Sir, you have just been handed a document. Will you have a look at it? And could you hold it up and let us know if you see your signature to which you referred? Thank you. And you said that you also placed your initials. Could you just point them out to us, please? Thank you. I'm asking that this statement be admitted as, well, I suppose it would be IE1.
Why not VP?
VP1, certainly.
Yes, the statement is standard is VP1.
Thank you. It has to be marked by Jim. This will be kept by the secretary. Now, so do you work,
Yes, I do.
and what do you do?
I'm currently the Chief Election Officer at the Guyana Elections Commission.
And what is the Guyana Elections Commission commonly called?
GCOM, the acronym.
Thank you. And how long have you held this position?
I've held this position since 14th December 2021.
And before you held that position, or before you took up that position, what did you do?
Well, there was a hiatus of about 4 years when I was unemployed, but prior to that, I was employed by the Guyana Elections Commission in the substantive position of Public Relations Officer from November 1, 2001 to August 7, 2014, at which point I was appointed Deputy Chief Election Officer, a position that I held up to 13th of August, the 12th of August, 2017.
Thank you. Now, for that period of 2001 to 2017, I think it is, could you tell us something about your experience with the election processes and the electoral processes in Guyana?
Certainly. So, upon assumption of the responsibilities of public relations officer, one of the first undertaking that I engaged with was to resuscitate the website of GCOM, which required that I research all the processes associated with national registration, as well as the conduct of general, regional, and local government elections. Now, that responsibility also required, because I had to relate to the general public, members of the media, that I had comprehensive knowledge of these processes. So that was the beginning of my exposure to the processes. During that tenure also, I served as de facto personal assistant to the chairman. I served for about 10 years up to 2014 as scribe to the commission. So I was directly involved in the deliberations associated with policy development as it relates to the management of elections and the registration processes.
Thank you. And during that period of time, did you participate in election day arrangements and so on?
Yes, in fact, during the period that I was Deputy Chief Election Officer, under the oversight of the Chief Election Officer, I was directly responsible for all preparations pertaining to the management of elections, including the immediate preparations for the general and regional elections of 2015, which included preparation for the discipline services, ballots, packing of the sensitive materials, including the ballots into the ballot boxes, distributing them to the respective polling stations, and ensuring that all processes were in place for the conduct of the poll on polling day.
Thank you. Now, you say that in your statement, you talk about an official manual prepared by the Secretariat of GCOM. If you see that manual again, will you be able to recognize it?
Yes, I will.
I'm asking that the witness be shown a manual. Have a look at that, sir.
Yes.
Is that the manual to which you refer in your statement?
Yes, I can say this is the manual that was used for the 2020 elections, and I say so on the basis of it having been endorsed by the current chairman. But also this is the exact, the content of this manual would be what is used for previous elections, because it's prepared under the same laws.
Thank you. I'm asking that this be admitted as VP1, and I have 3 copies for the commissioners.
VP1, VP1 is,
I beg your pardon.
VP2.
VP1A, shall we say?
Yes, because yes, VP1A.
Yes, VP1A. commission. Mr. Prasad, if the commission allows, would you Okay, no problem. Could you just indicate to us if you get to that point? Yes. And if I could just ask you to indicate because I suppose it's heading straight into it. If it becomes uncomfortable, will you let us know? Thank you.
I think it might have been in effect since 2006. This would have been a revised version.
Now, during the election process, can you tell us something about how observers are permitted to view the Guyanese elections?
Observers, there are two categories of observers. First, the international observers that are invited by the government, I think, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yes.
And I believe the accreditation for those observers are done by through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. At the local level, there is a law that provides for the accreditation of local observers by GCOM, and that is something that has been in practice.
Okay, and can you remember which piece of legislation deals with that?
It is in the Election Law Amendment Act number 15 of 2000. I think the section might be section 20, but it might be 21 or 22.
Thank you. So how does an observer, how does a local observer become how does a local applicant become an observer?
Well, really, the applicant, so far as has happened, had been local groups. It could be one of the civil society organization. It could be a grouping of religious bodies, but they merely write an application to the chairman asking for accreditation as local observers.
Sure. Is there a process that GCOM goes through before granting accreditation?
Well, as a matter of policy, GCOM would have developed certain codes by which local observers must abide, and they would be informed that they must abide by these codes, otherwise their accreditation could be rescinded.
Sure. And on election day, are they given any badges or so on to indicate that they are official accredited observers?
Yes, they are.
Now, can you just tell us a little bit about the process which takes place before an election is held in the Republic of Guyana? Are lists put up, for example?
Well, the formal process for preparation of elections, I would say, commences with the extraction of a preliminary list of electors from the National Registration Database, National Register of Registrars Database, to prepare an official list of electors for the elections. Now, the preliminary list is referred to as the PLE, would go through a phase which we call the claims and objections exercise that allows persons who are qualified, who are eligible to vote, to be added to that list, and also to remove persons who it is believed are not eligible for inclusion in the list. However, that is has to be done through an objection. However, the objection has to be substantiated by valid evidence. For example, in the case of a person objecting to the inclusion of a name of any other person on the grounds that that person would have died, a original birth certificate must be
Death
provided.
certificate, you mean?
Yes, that certificate has to be provided.
Yes. So how does the public know what's on the list?
So the lists are gazetted, sorry, this action has to be gazetted. And in that gazette, the gazette carries a schedule that says that these lists are going to be posted for public scrutiny at two different buildings in each registration division. And the lists are also available at the registration offices. GCOM has registration offices across the country, 29 of them, where persons can also access these lists. The lists are also posted on the GCOM website. The lists are also shared with, in the first instance, the parliamentary political parties.
And on election, sorry.
Are you speaking of the pre-claims and objections list or post?
I'm talking, well, it's pre in the sense that it's extracted for use in the claims and objections exercise, but it is still the preliminary list during the period of claims and objections.
Yes. And after claims and objections are settled, is there a list which is used for the purposes of what takes place on election day?
Well, it's not there yet, because there is a regulation that requires that after the claims and objections exercise and the changes that would have been effected therefrom, you arrive at a revised list of electors, which by regulation has to be displayed again in similar fashion for public scrutiny for a period of 21 days. During that period, the chief election officer is allowed to make corrections to that list which might have occurred as a result of inadvertence.
Certainly. So on election day, is there a list available for voters to see?
Yes.
And where can voters see that list?
So there's a requirement for that list to be posted before election day at every single polling station, as well as on election day. It has to be displayed there as is statutorily required at the polling station.
Thank you. Now, could you tell us a little bit about how voting is done on election day itself?
All right. So the elector enters the polling station. The polling station is set up in a way so that there is a smooth flow. Upon entry, the elector, if he's in possession of his ID card, would give it to the poll clerk. Is the first person that the elector would reach. The poll clerk would announce the name of the person. The poll clerk is in possession of a list of electors for that polling station.
Sure.
The poll clerk would check to see this person, as per the ID card, is listed. Having confirmed that, would call out the name and the serial number on the list, and then display the ID card for the benefit of polling agents who would be there on the appointment of the political parties to verify that this is in fact the person, because they also have a copy of the list of electors for that polling station.
Right.
So they're able to verify, yes, this is the person, and indeed, as had been called out by the poll clerk, this is the elector who he claims to be.
So there is a process then, from what you have explained, of ensuring that the person who has entered the polling station is in fact the person you have listed, correct?
Yes. In fact, it goes further, if I may. If the elector is not in possession of an ID card, he would have to state to the poll clerk his name and address. They will go through the list of electors to confirm that they do have someone by that name at that address. They have, at the polling station, the the GCOM staff as well as the party agents have what we call a folio.
Could you briefly tell me what is contained on the folio?
So the folio contains the identical information that is on the voters list, but in addition, it carries the photograph of the person against the written particulars, but there would also be some additional information that is not required to be published in the voters list. For example, we may decide at GCOM, just for the purpose of helping to identify this person, the mother's name. So we can ask this person, what is the name of your mother?
Sure. Now, just pause for a minute. Have you had any queries by voters after any election during the years of your experience about the use of the folio identification process?
If we've had any queries?
Yes, or complaints?
No, not at all.
You said a while ago that the voter who presents himself for purposes of exercising candidate produces an ID card. That card carries a photograph?
Yes, it does.
And can I ask you further, would the details, including the photograph on the card, match the information, including the photograph, that is on the folio?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Is voting done by ballot?
Yes.
And if you see a copy of a ballot, would you be able to identify it?
Yes.
Well, I suppose a specimen copy
Yes.
of a ballot.
Yes.
Might the witness be shown this with the commission's leave? Will you have a look at that, sir? Can you tell us something? A document has been placed in your hand. Could you tell us something about what is on that document?
First of all, this document reaches the legal specification that has the counterfoil section that provides for the electors' number, the serial number on the official list of electors. It has a perforation that separates the general election from the ballot for the general election from the regional election. It carries the parties are listed in alphabetical order as is required. They carry the full name of the party as well as the acronym as well as the symbol of the respective party. So yes.
Thank you. I'm asking that this be admitted. VP 1C, 1B, sorry. And I do have 3 copies to the Commissioner. Do you think there's anything on these that we have?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. So I just want to clarify one little thing in relation to the folio. Do party agents from the political parties get copies of the folio?
Yes, they do.
And you told us earlier about observers and GCOM accrediting observers and so on. Is there a facility by which observers are allowed to be in the polling stations observing the process?
Yes, there is.
Now, what time would the polls close?
Polls are required to be closed at 6 p.m. However, if there are people in the line at a polling station that had the opportunity to cast their vote as yet, then it is likely that the polls will close at a point when the last person in the line at 6 o'clock would have been allowed to vote.
I see. So once you are in the line at 6 o'clock, you are allowed to vote.
Yes.
That is not a discretion.
No, it's a requirement.
It's a necessary requirement. Thank you.
After the polls are closed, what will the staff of GCOM do at the polling station?
So they allow themselves a little lull before they actually get to the point of counting the votes. Now, the presiding officer, who is the head of that polling station, would announce to all present which can, if they're there, the agents of the respective political parties. There can be candidates of political parties can be there. So the presiding officer will announce that he's now going to open the ballot box to facilitate the counting of the ballots. Yes.
I think this is the first time you're mentioning the presiding officer. Who appoints the presiding officer?
The presiding officer is appointed by GCOM as by the chief election officer under the authority as delegated by the commission.
Is he required to be a public officer?
There's no prohibition from it. Could be a public officer. It could be from somebody from the private sector. It could be somebody who's totally unemployed.
Thank you.
Is the presiding officer the same as the returning officer?
No, it's not. The presiding officer is responsible for a specific polling station, whereas the returning officer is responsible for a district.
Right. Now, I want you to go back a little bit. So, how do the ballots to be used? How, in what form are they brought to the polling stations?
Right. So, all ballot boxes for the entire country are packed centrally. We're at the Secretariat, at the main office of the Elections Commission, under the supervision of the Chief Election Officer, with the involvement of agents of the political parties who are there to ensure to see that what we're putting in there is actually what should go in there, and no less than what should go in there. So this activity takes place at the Central Secretariat, after which, of course, the ballot statements of poll, tally sheets, some other materials that we classify as sensitive materials go into the ballot box. When that packing is over, the box is sealed with numbered seals, stored in the container for dispatch to the districts. When they go out to the districts on the morning of election day at about 4 o'clock in the morning, the presiding officer, they will come and uplift the ballot box that is numbered in accordance with the polling station that they have been assigned. They uplift the boxes and move to the polling station, where the box is opened, or the seals are removed and the contents emptied out in the presence of all the persons who are authorized to be there, that being the GCOM staff as well as party scrutineers. So the seals are removed, everything is emptied out and separated for use as they are required.
Sure. Now, you just used a new term, party scrutineers. Are they the same as party agents?
They're agents. Actually, scrutineers refer to registration.
Yes.
Agents refer to elections.
Thank you. And after the ballots are placed in the boxes and polls are closed, what happens?
So you're talking about the marked ballots
Yes.
being placed in the box. So at the close of the poll, the presiding officer will announce that we are now going to move to the process of counting the ballots. The presiding officer will remove the seals which would have been placed prior to the commencement of conduct of the poll. The box is resealed at that point. The presiding officer removes the seal at the close of the poll, empties the contents of the box on a table in full view of all the persons who are authorized to be there and who are actually present.
And explain very briefly what's the process of counting, because I noticed that the ballot you produced has a perforation
Yes.
down the middle.
So each ballot is separated at the point where it's perforated, and they're kept in separate heaps, one for regional, one for general. When all of the ballots are separated, the presiding officer will distribute to the ballot clerk, the deputy assistant presiding officer, and all of the agents who were there present before he or she proceeds with the count.
Mr. Prasad, I believe I have that last review of my cousin. Maybe to the relative, if you were to explain what the object of the elections are, in the sense that we have national and regional,
Right.
which is why the ballot paper is doing.
Yes.
Please explain.
Right. So what we have, which are referred to really as general elections, in fact provide for the election of members to the National Assembly, as well as the election of members to what we call regional democratic councils that are responsible for management at a level lower than the National Assembly in the 10 what we call administrative regions in Guyana. So the bottom half of the ballot paper is really for those regional elections. However, there is a provision in there's a provision that provides for geographic representation in Parliament, by which 25 of the 65 seats in Parliament come from these 10 administrative regions, and the quantum depends on the population of those regions. For example, in District 3, there will be 3 geographic seats in Parliament. In District 4, it's 7. If I may go further, at the point of allocation of seats, the first allocation is done on the basis of the regional seats. However, the representation in Parliament, which is done on proportional representation, is calculated using the total number of votes cast divided by the number of seats in Parliament. This is 65, so that will give you the quota per seat. Now, if a political party gets 6 seats in Parliament from the 65 calculation, but would have already been allocated 2 seats at the geographic level, when we take 25 from 65, there is a 40, what is referred to as the national top-up. So 6, but would have already gotten 2, so you will now get 4 out of the top-up, 36, and 36 are there to be applied in the same manner to the other political parties.
I see. So the process for the allocation of seats is contained in what piece of legislation? Can you assist us?
I think that too is in the Election Law Amendment Act 15 of 2000. Because I think it was that act that brought in the geographic representation aspect.
Now, you told us that the ballots are separated into regional and general, and the counting begins.
Yes. So, by practice, the presiding officer will start with the general, would take the ballots, see the party for whom it is marked, would call the vote as having been cast for that party, would show the ballot to the agents who are there, and all the persons with the tally sheet would be required to place a stroke in the space provided for that. So one stroke in the ballot, in the tally sheet, represents a vote cast for the party, depending on how it's called.
Okay, before I take you to the tally sheet, if there is a questioned ballot, how is that addressed?
So a question ballot could arise because it is shown to the agents. An agent might say, for example, because the tail of an X may cross into the space provided for voting for a different party. So an agent may say, I object because that vote is not properly crossed. The presiding officer can say, but the intersection of the X is in this, is for this party that I called. But the determination of which party the ballot is cast for rests with the presiding officer. So the presiding officer will say, well, this is for the party as I called, but because an objection was raised, the ballot was questioned, there is a requirement that at the back of that ballot, a Q is marked, and that ballot is initialed by the presiding officer.
Thank you. Now, you started telling us about tally sheets, and I'm going to show you a document. I'm going to ask that you be shown a document.
May I add something to what I just said?
Sure, certainly.
The purpose of the queue is so that because the agent, through his or her party, can request for a partial recount at the level of the returning officer with reference to that ballot. So it would be easily identifiable by the queue as well as the signature of the presiding officer.
Indeed. So you told us you mentioned tally sheets earlier, so I'm just going to ask if you be shown a document. A document has now been placed in your hand. Would you indicate to us what that is?
This is, in fact, a specimen of the tally sheet that is being used when we conduct elections.
And what information is that tally sheet required to contain?
Well, in the first instance, it will say the region that the votes are being checked for, the division or subdivision, because polling stations are established on the basis of the number of electors in that division, which could require one polling station, or if the number of electors are too many, it will be subdivided into subdivisions. So we may have two. So the number could be for a division or subdivision. And then the parties again are listed alphabetically, and space is provided for the placement of the strokes as the ballots are being counted.
Thank you. I'm asking that this be admitted as VP 1C, and I have 3 copies for the commissioners.
Yes. VP wants D.
1C.
D.
We had one C already.
Yes.
One specimen ballot was one C.
Okay.
This has to be one D. This is the tally sheet.
Yes, the specimen tally sheet. Commissioners, I have this statement as VP1, the manual as VP1A,
A, yes.
the ballot as VP1B. I think I had initially made an error which I corrected. And the tally sheet should be VP1C.
We have,
I believe you did.
Yes,
yes. So this should be C.
yes,
So the specimen ballot would be VP1B.
yes. I apologize for that. It's my error.
Before we, Ms. Odd, forgive me if I missed
It's
it
okay.
in the event that you did cover it. But when the counting process properly begins at the polling station,
Yes.
can you tell us who are the persons expected to be present?
Yes.
I don't say present,
Yes.
but expected to be present.
Yes. So it would be the staff who had been assigned to work there, that being the presiding officer, the assistant
Which would be
presiding,
GCOM employees.
GCOM employees, yes. The agents of political parties who would have been accredited prior to polling day, and candidates of political parties from the respective districts. There is also the police who is there to ensure security, but that police is there during the count.
Thank you.
Now, I think you had referred to a document called the Statement of Poll. If you see a specimen of such a document, will you be able to recognize it?
Yes, I will.
I'm asking that the witness be shown a document. A document has been placed in your hand, sir. Could you tell us what that document is?
Yes, this is in fact a specimen copy of a statement of poll. This is what an actual statement of poll would look like.
And what is the use of this? What is it used for?
This basically is used to record the outcome of the counting of the votes for every polling station. There is provision for recording of the total votes cast for each political party against the name and symbol of that party. It provides for the documentation of the particulars of the polling station. It provides for party agents who would have witnessed the count to authenticate the accuracy of the information on this document by placing their signature thereon.
And do party agents have these copies of these statements of
Yes,
polls?
they do. The presiding officer is required to make enough, sufficient copies is the word used, to ensure that all those who are there are in receipt of a copy of this document.
An authenticated copy by signature.
Yes, but it's not compulsory that they sign. They can refuse to sign. But the agents can refuse to sign, but the presiding officer must sign.
Oh.
Now, you say that they receive copies. Is this carbon copy or photocopies?
Well, these things are produced as pre-carbonated. They come, but at the commission we refer to all of the copies as original copies.
I see. So is it correct to say that party agents would have original copies of statements of polls?
poll, yes.
And just so that I could move us along a little bit, do you refer to statements of polls as SOPs?
Yes, we do.
After the votes, I'm sorry, let me ask that this be admitted and marked as VP1D And I have 3 copies for the commissioners.
While that's being tendered, may I ask, on going back to the tally sheet, clearly this is the tally sheet is what the presiding officer works off in the committee. Are party agents also supplied with these tally sheets?
Yes, yeah.
So everybody is working off
Yes.
the same
Yes.
tally sheet?
Yes.
Yes. Tally sheet is admitted into evidence as
Statement.
statement. Sorry.
Yes.
VP
Commissioners,
1D.
at this point, I need to ask your indulgence because members of the public looking on are not able to see these exhibits. So we have them scanned and we are asking for the opportunity to have them put up on the screen. So very quickly, the documents will be viewed by those looking on.
Certainly.
It's on? Okay, Q, now could you just go on what, I don't know what they're saying. So could you let me know when it's due? No, one that is. I'm just making sure that they are able to see and it's scrolled down
There
properly.
seems to be concerns at the back.
Thank you. I believe that the exhibits have been made visible to those looking on. So let's continue, Mr. Prasad. After the ballots are counted, that's to say after people have cast their votes and the ballots have been counted at the polling stations, what becomes of them?
They are placed in designated envelopes. The ballot, there's a separate envelope for general ballot, there's a separate for regional ballots, there is a separate envelope for spoiled ballots, and these are all placed in their respective envelopes and sealed and put aside so that at the point of putting back everything in the ballot box, they will go in there and the box will seal.
And the boxes are resealed.
Yes.
Now, when you say sealed, tell us what that means.
So sealing as the thing we produce at every stage where the ballot box is required to be sealed, we provide the presiding officers with differently identifiable seals, and all of these seals are numbered so that there is a record from the point of where we place them in the ballot box at the central packing point to the polling station. So there will be a set of seals that would have been in the box that the presiding officer used to reseal the ballot
Certainly.
box.
And you told us that the envelopes are also sealed.
Yes.
Is there only one seal on the envelope?
So we provide, for sealing purposes of envelopes, we provide the traditional wax seal
Sure.
that we also put in the box. The presiding officer is provided with match and candles to use to melt the wax on the part of the envelope where the fold goes, and then every presiding officer has a stamp which we call the PO seal, carries the initials, the letters PO, to place on that seal, authenticating that it was sealed by the presiding officer.
Now this might sound like a bit of an obvious question, but I need to ask it. What do these envelopes look like?
They're regular brown envelopes, only that they're labeled specifically as is required.
Sure. And apart from the presiding officer, is anyone else entitled to place any sort of seal on that brown envelope?
Yes, the party agents are permitted to do so if they so desire.
After the ballots which have been cast have been returned to the ballot boxes and the ballot boxes have been sealed, what is the next step?
So before we even go there, I must mention also that the party agents are also allowed to put seals on the ballot box in addition to the GCOM seals.
Okay,
So
thank you.
well, even before we reach to the stage of what we do with the ballot boxes, in preparing the statements of poll, the presiding officer is required to prepare two separate statements of poll for that polling station. One to be delivered to the returning officer, the envelope would be so marked. One to be delivered to the chief election officer, the envelope would be so marked. Those two envelopes are in the possession of the presiding officer, whose responsibility it is to ensure that those envelopes and the ballot box is delivered to the returning officer. The delivery of the ballot boxes, there is a legal provision for party agents to accompany the movement of the ballot boxes, and usually GCOM make provision for the movement.
In the ballot box, the only documents that are placed in the ballot box are the marked ballots.
No. The marked ballots, the unmarked ballots which might have been remaining, which were unused ballots, spoiled ballots, rejected ballots, and those type of things go into that. In separate envelopes. The
No.
marked lists that were used by the presiding officer goes into that ballot.
No statutorily required document is placed in that box.
As in, if you mean, in this case, statement of poll, the answer is no. Because the ballot is a statutory document.
Now, we touched on the description of an official called a returning officer. Who is a returning officer?
The returning officer is the person who has been appointed by GCOM and who has taken an oath of office to be responsible for the conduct of elections in a particular, well, we call them electoral districts, but it's for an administrative region also. Electoral districts and administrative regions are really amongst the same.
And who is a deputy returning officer?
So a deputy returning officer is appointed to assist the returning officer with carrying out his duties in the particular district. Usually a deputy returning officer would be assigned responsibilities more administrative than other for a particular geographic area, but more so for what we call a cluster of polling stations.
Sure. And in the absence of a returning officer, let's say in some unforeseen circumstances, is a deputy returning officer able to do what he does?
Well, not necessarily, because what the provision is that if a returning officer is unable to carry out the functions of that office, it is the clerk to the returning officer that assumes the responsibility of the returning officer. Deputy returning officers are assigned specific responsibilities.
But could you clarify for me? Let's say in a particular district, will you only have one returning officer?
Yes.
And how do you determine how many deputy returning officers there are for each particular district?
That would depend on the division or separation of the number of polling stations. So, and we do this really to ensure that administratively we could ensure that all polling stations are properly prepared and maintained for the conduct of the poll.
Okay. And are you able to say, you are now the CEO of GCOM, so are you able to say in the 2020 elections, who was the returning officer for District 4?
Yes.
Who was-
His name is Claremont Mingo.
And had you known Mr. Mingo before?
Yes, I have.
And prior to that, how long had you known him?
Well, I've known Mr. Mingo, I think, since around 2006, up to the point of my departure from GCOM in 2017.
Sure. Now, are you able to tell us, as CEO, I take it that you are responsible for the records of GCOM.
Yes.
So are you able to tell us for the 2020 elections, how many district, I beg your pardon, deputy returning officers had been appointed for District 4?
I think it might have been in the 90s, the number of deputy returning officers. We're talking about deputy returning officers?
Yes.
Yes, it would be, I think, a bit above 90 deputy returning officers.
Right. Now, does a deputy returning officer have the power to assist with the counting in any district?
Not without such authority having been given to him or her by the returning officer. And only in the presence of the returning officer
Yes.
and the other persons authorized to be there.
Sure. What is an election return? Could you explain that to us?
Yes, an election return is a statutory form. It's numbered. It's Form 24 that is provided for in the Representation of the People Act, that is used by the returning officer to record the results of the elections for the particular district.
And the information which informs that return comes from the statements of poll?
Yes, that's the only place it can come from.
After a returning officer has, well, is it correct to say that it is only after the counting is concluded that the statements, the numbers on the statements of poll are added up?
So this is taking us back to the polling station, because that's where the votes are counted.
Yes.
Yes.
And the statement, the numbers on the statements of poll are what are used to determine what appears on the election return, correct?
Yes.
So, is it correct to say that if you have incomplete statements of polls, there should be no election return?
Well, you cannot reach the point of preparing that statement of poll, that return, if you have an incomplete or an improper or incorrect statement of poll.
Certainly. And after the return is done, is there a declaration?
Yes, there is.
Who does such a declaration?
The returning officer is required to make a public declaration using the information on the Form 24,
And
the
when you-
election return.
Right. And the election return must reflect the totals contained in the statements of poll.
The totals for the region as derived from the statements of poll.
Is there anything which allows a returning officer to make a declaration where the counting has not been completed and the statements of polls have not been tallied up?
No, there's no such provision.
After the declaration, if any party disagrees with the declaration or what has been said, is there a procedure to be followed?
Yes, there is provision for the agent of a party who may have concerns pertaining to the declaration to request a recount. It could be a partial recount or a total recount of the ballots for the region, but such a request must be submitted to the returning officer no later than 12 o'clock on the day after the declaration is made.
And does this request have to be in any particular form?
Well, there's no standard form. It could be a simple letter requesting the recount.
Let's step back a little bit to the declaration. After a returning officer makes a declaration for a particular district, what if anything is the returning officer required to do?
The returning officer, having made his declaration, is required to take the completed election return to the chief election officer.
And this is, I take it, this is after you have declared results from, what number was it? 10 returning officers, the number you gave us?
So
10 returning officers?
yeah, there are 10 returning officers, but each of them is required to take their respective election return to the chief election officer.
And what is the chief election officer then required to do in turn?
The chief election officer is required to use those returns to compile the results for the entire country and to submit his collation of those results in manual, it's called, in the written form, as well as in an electronic form to the commission for declaration.
Can you tell us in 2020 who were the members of the commission?
The same members who are there now. The chairman is retired Justice of Appeal Claudette Singh. The commissioners nominated by the current opposition are Commissioner Vincent Alexander, Commissioner Desmond Trotman, and Commissioner Charles Corbin. The commissioners who have been, yes, the commissioners who have been nominated by the People's Progressive.
Is the witness going to quickly?
Corbin.
Corbin, C-O-R-B-I-N.
On the PPP side, those nominated are Mr. C.S. Gunraj, Mr. Manoj Narayan, and Mr. Clement Rohi.
How do you spell Mr. Rohi's surname?
R-O-H-E-E.
And are you familiar with Mrs. Bibi Shadiq?
Yes.
And was Mrs. Shadiq not a commissioner in 2020?
Oh, yes, she was. Regrettably, she is deceased and was replaced by Mr. Rohi.
Thank you. Now, are the final results for the elections gazetted?
Yes, they have to be.
And whose responsibility is that?
The chief election officer under the instructions of the commission.
Now, before we round off your evidence, you told us that you had known Mr. Mingo for many years and that he was the registration officer. I beg your pardon, he was the returning officer for District 4 in 2020.
Yes, but we had no relationship with that engagement that he had.
Understood. During the period of time that you had known him when you were at GCOM, well, what did he do? What was his job at the time? Can you recall?
Yes, Mr. Ming. So we have Guyana divided into registration areas that are responsible for defined geographic areas. Mr. Mingo was responsible for a portion of region number 5, and we call his area of responsibility the Fort Wellington registration area.
And what would he be doing as part of his job?
Mr. Mingo was responsible for the registration of persons from within that registration area under the National Registration Act.
I forgot to ask you this. In 2020, who was the chief election officer? That's to say, for the general election.
To my knowledge, it was Mr. Keith Lowenfield.
And who was the deputy chief election officer?
I think her name was Miss Roxanne Myers.
And do Mr. Lowenfield and Miss Myers still work for GCOM?
No, they do not.
When did can you recall when their relationship or their employment with GCOM ended?
Not with specific dates, but it would have been somewhere around June, July of 2021.
Were they terminated from their positions?
I think their contracts would have been, there's a clause in the contracts of the employment contracts of all GCOM employees that allows for termination on the basis of either party giving 3 months notice or payment in lieu of notice. I think that clause was used to part company with both Mr. Lowenfield and Ms. Myers. But my knowledge is based on what I read in the media. I was not at GCOM.
Sure, well, only tell us about what you know.
Yes.
Okay? So, are you familiar with the name Robeson Ben? B-E-N-N?
Yes, I am.
And was Mr. Ben a commissioner?
Yes. He would have been a commissioner at the time of the 2020 elections.
Okay. So, was he then replaced by anyone?
I think Mr. Ben was replaced by Mr. Manoj Narayan.
Thank you. Are you familiar with the name Enrique Livan, L-I-V-A-N?
I'm familiar with the name, but not the person. I know of Enrique Livan having been, well, he continues to be an employee of GCOM.
In 2020, or in March 2020, for the general election, where was the counting done for District 4?
Based on my knowledge, that was done at the office of the returning officer, which was located in what we call the Ashman's building at Hadfield and High Streets. I believe that would be Working Rust. The
Sure.
area is called Working Rust.
And is that the same building which now houses GCOM headquarters?
No.
I want to ask you a little bit about security at GCOM. Now, you told us that you are responsible for all the records kept at GCOM. So, would you also be responsible for materials such as security footage, let us say?
I would have to have knowledge at least as to where it is stored.
Sure. And in relation to the elections of, or what occurred or what may have occurred in March 2020 at Ashman's building, are you able to say whether there is any security footage available?
No, I am not aware that any such footage is available. In fact, I did inquire. I was informed that the cameras were installed in that building on the instructions of the chief election officer. That might have been done by a private service provider. Nobody seems to know when the cameras were removed nor where the footage might be. And in terms of records, may I venture that when I assumed office in the office of the chief election officer, where the computers which should have had information or could have had information in that regard, all of the computers were wiped clean.
Thank you. And final bit of information which I want to elicit from you, sir. Who is responsible for disciplining GCOM staff?
The Elections Commission.
Thank you. Subject to any questions which the commissioners may have for you, sir, these are my questions, please.
So you said that the Form 24 returns are submitted to the Chief Elections Officer. Who does what with them?
The Chief Election Officer is required to use the information from those forms to collate the results for the entire country. In the first place, a collation is done for the national elections and for the then for the regional elections. And those results he must present to the Commission for declaration. It is the Commission that is responsible for the declaration of the results.
So his collation effort is submitted to the Commission?
Yes.
And can I ask you, does the Chief Elections Officer, in that exercise of collating the information, does the Chief Elections Officer have any discretion to alter, to delete, to ignore any of the information contained in the Form 24 return?
None whatsoever to my knowledge, and I must confess I went back, I reviewed that section before I came to this meeting and this hearing, and there is no such provision.
Do we have a copy of the report
I do not have one with me, but I can have one made available.
Mr. Prasad, you said the actual accounting takes place in accordance with so when you said counting for District 4 was conducted as a passion.
Actually, that wasn't counting. That was the collation.
That confused me because you said,
yes.
you said counting for District 4 was conducted as a passion.
Yes.
So just so I understand this process, District 4 had how many floors?
I think it might have been 879, but it might very well. But that's a figure in my head. 879 polling stations for District 4.
And each one of those polling stations has a polling officer there.
A presiding officer.
Presiding officer.
Yes.
Who is then overseen by the returning officer.
Yes.
So counting for those 807 taking place in a separate and distinct position.
Yes.
And the process you described in sealing of the box and packaging, those will all have occurred in those separate.
Respectively, yes.
And when the boxes are sealed, they're transferred to a particular place.
Yes, designated. What we have done for easy access, we would have established points where we place containers with all required security that the presiding officer will take the box and ensure that it's properly handed over and stored in the container.
And this ends up where? At the returning office?
Eventually, because the entire district is considered to be under the jurisdiction of the returning officer, so he has control over that container. But it doesn't require that we move that container from there to the office of the returning officer. Then retrieval takes place to come back to the central secretariat. So what we would do for logistical reasons, pick up the containers from their respective positions, and I must say that usually a deputy returning officer is placed at the point where every container is and has supervisory responsibilities for those containers.
So absent any complaints or controversy, a returning officer is expected to receive in his hands statements of support from the respective forces.
Yes.
And with that, he uses that to prepare the form.
Yes. Yes.
Just arising out of one of the Honorable Commissioner's questions, may I just ask this witness one other thing? So could you describe for us what is tabulation in the electoral process?
So tabulation is what is done at the office of the returning officer, using the different statements of poll, taking the results as documented in the statements of poll by political party to bring all together to arrive at the total for the region for each of the contestants.
Thank you. And these are my questions.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Might we be relieved?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Much obliged.
Now take morning break.
Please stand.